So I'm figuring my way around, obviously. I like the way no one's pointing and laughing. And that's the end of the no pointing and laughing. So it is good for me to be with you. I have been looking forward to this for a long time. My name is Mia, and I am your vicar. I'm on my internship year, my final year of seminary, in my time preparing to become a pastor. I'm a native Idahoan. I actually grew up in Caldwell, went to elementary school in Caldwell. We moved to Boise when I was in high school. And as you can tell from the gray hair, that was a lot of years ago. My husband and I have been married 29 years, and it's been a busy 29 years. We have 3 children who are officially launched. They are out independent. We have 6 children still at home. And of those, 3 of those are a sibling group that we adopted from Idaho foster care. So their needs are very high, emotionally and supervision. And we have a small dairy. And by small, I mean small. We have 3 cows. And we sell at the Boise Co-op and the farmer's market. Our cow, Clara, was due to calve yesterday, and I hope to have baby pictures for you, but she is still pregnant and looking very unpleased with the whole, she just looks at me like, don't talk to me right now. I feel terrible. My internship is a 2-part internship. So I've just finished 9 months at Emmanuel in Boise, and now I will spend 9 months with you here, learning from you, being formed by you in that unique role of pastor, being formed in that unique role of pastor and congregation, being formed by you and by Pastor Megan, and being formed with you as God forms us together. Today's readings, God is forming us with 2 stories of widows. Now, widowhood in ancient Palestine was a precarious position, because women couldn't own land. And this was an agricultural society. So if you owned land, you could grow food. I mean, it was that simple. So not having land was a very big problem. Now this economic system, taken at face value, it doomed widows and orphans and foreigners. It doomed them to destitution and starvation. And so no economic system created by human beings is perfect. So God provides balance. So we hear throughout the Old Testament, throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, the command to care for the widow and the orphan and the alien, to care for those left behind by the system. In our first reading from 1 Kings, the widow we hear about isn't even an Israelite. She was in Zaraphath. And her situation was dire. There was a drought in the land. So if there's, the rain waters the crops, and if there's not enough rain, the crops don't grow, and there is not enough food. And she's on the bottom rung. And she was running out of food. It was at the very end. She had enough for one more meal, and then she would starve. And she would watch her son starve. Death awaited her. And then we hear that God commanded her to feed Elijah. God commanded her to feed Elijah. I wonder, what was that like? Did she have a vision and an angel came to her and said, there's this guy coming and I'd like you to feed him? And she probably was like, excuse me, I'm out of food. Or did she just have this strong sense that her last bit of food would be used for something miraculous? Or was it not until Elijah spoke? It was not until she heard the words, bring me a little water, bring me some food, that it wasn't until she heard those words that they were sticky in her head. You know those words that stick in your head? You hear 1,000 words all day long, and somebody says 3 words, and they are loud in your consciousness. They are sticky. And so Elijah shows up. He also is facing starvation. Here are 2 desperate people looking starvation right in the face, and she follows the call of God. She follows God's command. She is faithful, and she shares that little bit of food. She trusts. And her trust is even more remarkable because she was not an Israelite. She talks about Elijah's, she says, your God. She is following the command of your God. And her faith brings life. The food does not run out. In the gospel, we hear about another widow. This widow is also poverty-stricken. She had 2 pennies left to live on, and she is also looking starvation right in the face. But her starvation is not caused by drought. The scribes, the religious leaders, the ones commanded to care for the widow and the orphan and alien, they had taken her home. Jesus says they devour widows' houses. It was a practice that they would promise to steward her estate for her. Well, she sure wasn't benefiting from their stewardship. Her starvation was caused by greed. And amazingly, like the widow of Zaraphath, she also is faithful. She knew about contributing to the treasury, that it was the treasury that funded the temple, this beautiful, magnificent temple where the ark was, the place where God rested. And she just wanted to be part of it. And so she brought her 2 last coins, and she gave them in faithfulness. And her faithfulness looks like it will lead to death. Jesus said she gave all she had to live on. And Jesus is mad. Jesus is mad. He's not mad at the widow. He's mad at those guys. Those guys, he says a lot of ornery things about people walking around in long robes. It always makes me nervous to read that, in church, wearing a long robe. Because he's calling out these scribes, these religious leaders who care more about the building than they do about the command of God. They care more about, it was beautiful and wonderful, but they care more about that than about following the God who rests in the temple. They feigned loyalty. They feigned faith while profiting. And Jesus is mad. We have 2 stories of widows, both faithful, both facing starvation. God saves the first one. We hear about that in the prophet Elijah. The meal, the flour did not run out. The jar of oil did not run out. But I wonder about the second. Did God save her too? I wonder, the people who heard Jesus spoke in the temple, did any of them suddenly have a vision? Did any of them have this strong sense of needing to care for her? Did any of them, those words of Christ, stick in their mind as they remembered the command to care for the widow and the orphan and the alien? Did God save her too? In our gospel reading, Jesus is at the temple. This is right before Jesus will face those same religious leaders, and his faithfulness will lead to death. It will lead to crucifixion. But we know that death is not the end of the story. We are resurrection people. We know that Jesus conquered that death. We know that Jesus conquered every death. Today, those widows are being held up for us as models of faithfulness, of a faithfulness that doesn't make sense, because it looked like it would lead to death, but it actually led to life. Jesus' faithfulness does not make sense. It looked like it was leading to death, but it actually led to life. And so there it is for us. We are called to a faithfulness that doesn't make sense, to a faithfulness that often looks like it's leading us to death, while it's actually leading us to great life. Today, God gives us these 2 stories to show us the way. And we don't follow this way alone. We follow it together. We follow it with each other, and we follow it with Christ. And for the next 9 months, I get to follow it with you.